Thank you very much, and thanks to the organizers for including us in the conference. And I'm going to update you on Tonix. We're a NASDAQ company. So I want to, this is our standard disclaimer that I'll be making forward-looking statements. And for more complete information about the company, please go to the SEC website where our 10K and other regulatory documents are found. Tonix is a development stage, a clinical development stage biotech company. We're working in the area of central nervous system disorders, and we have one program in biodefense that I'll also tell you about. But at the top are two programs, our lead programs, which are both based on the same molecule and same formulation. The lead program is called Tonmya, which is a treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And we have done 2 large efficacy studies, and we are imminently going to start a phase 3 study in the United States. And I'm going to tell you more about that study soon. We have FDA breakthrough therapy designation for the PTSD program. And I'll tell you more about details from a recent meeting with FDA. But a particularly important aspect of that meeting was that we are using the week 4 CAPS-5 data as our primary endpoint in this study. Below that is a program with fast track designation for agitation in Alzheimer's disease. And I'll tell you about that too. Now at the bottom are 2 different programs. The TNX 601 is a pre-IND candidate for PTSD. It works in a completely different mechanism than the Tonmya lead program. And below that, a novel smallpox vaccine that I'll tell you about at the end. Most of the time, we're going to be speaking about Tonmya. PTSD is found in both military and civilian individuals. The 2 studies that we've done in PTSD have been in veterans, active duty, and reservists. It's common in veterans. About 20% of veterans from the recent conflicts have PTSD, but it's a bigger problem at least numerically, in civilians, because although 5% of civilians have PTSD, there are many more people who haven't served in the military. So overall, there are about 11 million Americans affected by PTSD, and there are about 4 times as many civilians relative to military. Sorry, I can't go backwards on this slide. Maybe I can. Okay. Okay. We have a number of patents on the formulation of Tonmya and TNX 102SL. You can see there are 3 different groups of patents. These are important because the active ingredient is cyclobenzaprine, which is a tricyclic that's been approved in a muscle relaxant product called Flexeril that's orally swallowed, and our product is a sublingual tablet. So these patents cover the sublingual formulation, the resulting pharmacokinetic profile, and the method of use for using it in PTSD. So the mechanism of this medicine, we believe, is to improve sleep quality. Improving sleep quality is completely different from traditional sleeping pills or hypnotics. And what we like to do to contrast them is to say our product improves sleep quality, and traditional sleep drugs increase sleep quantity. So ours is not a sedative, it doesn't knock people out, but the idea is that the brain processes that happen during the night occur better with Tonmya treatment, at least in people with PTSD. So this is the, as I've said, we've worked in military PTSD in 2 large studies. And in retrospective analysis, particularly of our recent phase 3 study, we found that recent trauma, within the first 9 years after trauma, was treatment responsive, but people who had index traumas further out than 9 years did not separate. I mentioned we have breakthrough therapy designation from the FDA, and we have a collaboration with the Department of Defense. There's a big need for treatments for PTSD. PTSD is, many people refer to it as the signature wound of the last 25 years of war. So unlike Vietnam or other conflicts like that, everyone came home or they're accounted for, but in many cases the psychological damage has left them quite traumatized. There are two products that are FDA approved for PTSD, Paxil and Zoloft, but neither of them has shown a benefit in military-related PTSD. And one of the big advances that's going on now is a real commitment from the Department of Defense and other parts of the government to really understand this problem of PTSD. The advantages of Tonmya is that, as I said, the mechanism is to improve sleep quality, but along with that advantage is that this is neither a benzodiazepine nor a narcotic. And furthermore, we already have an understanding with FDA that we have completed what will be required to show that it is non-addictive. So we do not have further addiction liability studies to complete. The medicine is taken once nightly at bedtime, which is also good for compliance. The studies that we've done so far, 2 studies, the first phase 2 study was completed and the phase 3 study was stopped early in an interim analysis. Both of them were in military-related PTSD. There's good tolerability, which I'll show you later. It resulted in FDA breakthrough designation. And furthermore, I'm going to take you through some of the retrospective analyses of the P301, the phase 3 study. So this is first the phase 2 study, where in red is the placebo, in blue is the drug arm, and the graph and the x-axis is the 12 weeks of therapy. The y-axis is a decrease in the severity of symptoms. And you can see that in this group, there was a change, drug versus placebo at 12 weeks, that was significant. This is not the dose that was declared the primary endpoint in that study. This is a higher dose than was declared the primary endpoint. But I think you can see that the green dose is an intermediate dose and was also intermediately effective. So we have kind of a dose effect in terms of decreased severity. And on the right is the proportion of people who went into remission. And remission, this is people who basically were asymptomatic from PTSD symptoms at both week 8 and week 12. So a stringent criteria of remission. And this is the phase 3 study, the HONOR study. And you can see on the left, the ITT population separated at week 4, but did not separate at week 12. But then when we divided them into the median point of trauma less than 9 years or trauma greater than 9 years, you can see the trauma less than 9-year group separated quite well. But it is interesting, and I'll come back to it, that even in the ITT population, we had separation at week 4. When we looked at why we were surprised at the outcome of the phase 3 study, we did these histograms, and this shows the time since trauma. In blue are the people in the phase 2 study, and in red are the people in the phase 3 study. And you can see that even though the phase 3 study was started only 2 years after the phase 3 study, the phase 3 started only 2 years after the phase 2, we had a pretty big shift of longer time since trauma in the phase 3 study. And this was unexpected, but we think that this accounted for the fact that the phase 3 study didn't replicate the results of the phase 2. But if you look at the people less than 9 years from trauma, the results were very similar between phase 2 and phase 3. This is a complicated graph, but basically showing the difference in CAPS, or the separation, according to how many years since trauma. And you can see that, you know, less than 9 years since trauma, it was all near that dotted line, which was the expected separation, and greater than 9 years since trauma, we had this unexpected movement by the people far from trauma. So sustained remission is another aspect in which if you look at the less than 9-year group in the phase 3 study, we had very similar results to the results that we'd gotten in the phase 2 study, about a 20%, 18% remission rate. So considering these people come in with essentially severe PTSD, there's definitely a strong response shown by this remission analysis in a group of people. This is the tolerability, and it shows the tolerability in both phase 2 and phase 3. P201 is the phase 2 study, P301 is the phase 3 study. And the side effects that were observed, the systemic side effects, I think can all be called nonspecific: somnolence, dry mouth, headache, insomnia, and sedation. These are the side effects reported in more than 5% of people. So it was actually a well-tolerated medicine. We also looked at phase 3. We didn't have many females because it was a military trauma group, but we looked at the females, and at least in terms of their numerical separation, the drug certainly seemed to be active in females. And we also looked at people in the cohort who had non-combat trauma, traumas like sex trauma and other things. And also we found a numerical improvement in those. And these are important issues because as I'll show you, in the study that we're about to do, the new phase 3 study, we're going to include civilian with military PTSD patients. So going into a population that will have females and non-combat trauma, it's reassuring to us that the drugs seem to be active in the small number of people that we had in phase 2 and phase 3. This is the phase 3 study that we're starting imminently. We expect to have top-line data in the mid of the first half of 2020, so slightly more than a year from now. It's going to be a 250-patient study, half on drug, half on placebo, parallel design. And all of the other aspects of the study are essentially replicating what we've done in phase 2 and phase 3. The one difference is, as I mentioned, well, the two differences, this will be civilian plus military patients, and also we are only enrolling people with trauma less than 9 years. So there's not a lot of competition in the PTSD space right now. There's another FDA breakthrough program, MDMA assisted psychotherapy. This is quite a different kind of indication that we're going for. There was recently encouraging data from a phase 2 study of Rexulti plus sertraline from Otsuka and Lundbeck, and Bionomics program appears to be on hold for now. So one of the aspects of improving sleep quality is that we think that this could be used for many different indications. Previously, we've done 2 large studies in fibromyalgia with encouraging results, and we are planning to go back into fibromyalgia. Again, the mechanism is to improve sleep quality. Fibromyalgia patients have a problem called non-restorative sleep, and we had very interesting data in the previous studies. Also, agitation in Alzheimer's disease is a potential indication, and we have an active IND and FDA fast track designation in agitation and Alzheimer's. We have another program in PTSD that's a completely different active ingredient called tianeptine. It's a drug that has been used in Europe for a number of years as treatment for depression, but that is we made an improved salt form, and it'll be a new chemical entity in the United States. It modulates the glutamatergic system, which is a popular and interesting neurotransmitter system in PTSD. And in this case, we're kind of starting the program in the middle because there are several, and this presentation is on our website, there are already 4 studies of varying quality showing effects of tianeptine in PTSD in other countries. We have a program developing a novel vaccine. This is a vaccine for smallpox. It's a very active year for smallpox drugs. There's speculation that some of the bad players around the world, like North Korea, may have this capability. So you may have seen that another company got a drug approved for smallpox over the summer, And there's another product that's, we think the BLA will be filed in 2019. So a lot is going on in this area. Ours is a horsepox vaccine, and we believe horsepox is more similar to what Edward Jenner used in 1800 than the current vaccines. In mouse studies, we had much better tolerability than the existing approved vaccine. In terms of our finances, we had approximately $15 million at the end of Q3. We added $17 million in Q4. So our pro forma cash, if you would, at the end of Q3 would be something like 30+ million. And we have, our market cap doesn't come out easily looking at Yahoo Finance or Google Finance, because we only have 2.6 million shares outstanding, but in reality, there's preferred stock that can be converted at the discretion or the decision of shareholders. So I think you should really calculate our market cap based on 6 million, which would be the number of preferred shares on a converted basis. We have a management team that's been together for a couple of years, taken the drug through the lead program through some of these trials. Jessica Morris, our COO, is in the audience. We have 13 employees in the company, and we've done a number of these complex trials together. So I think we have all the expertise we need to get this over to the finish line. And in terms of milestones, the recovery study, the new phase 3 study, will be started imminently. And as I said, we expect to have data from that in the first half of 2020. And the other, I think, important thing that will happen in 2019 is the TNX 601 tianeptine product will get into the clinic. So we'll have two molecules in the clinic. So in summary, we're in phase 3 with a breakthrough therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a major unmet need, 11 million Americans. We have activity in military PTSD, which is an unmet need, but also the benefit of the existing products in civilian PTSD leads something. They're not a solution for everyone. We have an IND and fast track designation for the indication of agitation in Alzheimer's. We're going to be in the clinic with a daytime PTSD medicine, TNX 601, tianeptine, this year. And finally, we have this innovative vaccine program underway. So with that, I'll thank you very much for your attention, and I'll take questions. Thanks. The question was, when do we plan to initiate Alzheimer's agitation? That's going to depend on funding. So we don't have the funding to do that study. We'd otherwise be ready to go. As I said, we have the IND active. We have fast track designation. But with the status of our lead program, we had to prioritize that over starting the agitation in Alzheimer's study. Yes?
You described the study as complementary. Are you considering using it in daytime and at night?
Thank you. Yeah, the question was, we described tianeptine as complementary, and tianeptine is definitely a daytime drug. If anything, from the European experience, it tends to be somewhat activating. And the question was, would we use one at daytime, one at night? It's something that would take years to develop, because obviously then you have to do, the safety of the products combined and all these other kinds of things. But at least from what we know of the mechanisms, it's a possible path of, some subsequent development. But our initial development for 601 will be as a standalone therapy, monotherapy, first-line therapy, very similar to what we've done for 102SL. We don't, know enough about, well, and your team know almost as much as we do, about how complex PTSD is. So we don't know whether, they'd be synergistic or not, or the same people would respond or not respond. Those are all very interesting questions. But we do have a pretty good handle on how TNX-102SL works. It interacts with 3 different receptors. It's a classic antagonist at 5-HT2A, alpha-1, and H1. And all 3 of those have been implicated in different ways in sleep quality. So we believe we have a pretty good handle on that. Tianeptine is quite a mystery. There's a lot written about it, and it clearly modulates the glutamatergic system, but it does not interact with AMPA receptors or NMDA receptors. So it'll be interesting to tease this apart, particularly as we start getting efficacy studies to understand how it modulates the glutamatergic system.
So do you anticipate that it may have an effect on different symptom clusters, like the cognition and mood?
Yeah, so the question is, do we think tianeptine might affect different symptom clusters? I think that's a fascinating possibility in the future, but we don't have any data. And the 4 studies in Europe are, interesting, but I wouldn't say that they provide a body of evidence that you can look at and say, this is how it's going to be different. In the symptom clusters that TNX-102SL interacts with we think of them, it's most active in the symptom clusters that are biological, and as you get into progressively behavioral symptoms, it doesn't have a strong effect. So hypervigilance is the biggest effect size. Next is intrusion, and then next is mood, and then at the bottom would be avoidance.
Any other questions for Seth? Very interesting company. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much.